This is one of the things we need to really begin to look at. It's one of the things, obviously, in particular, because I am burdened um, with wanting to see African Americans as a nation, as a people group, embrace Orthodoxy at a larger scale, because the quote unquote black church has been useful, and it's like everyone else, like whether they're society friends, Quakers, whatever it is. I mean, it's people have a measure of light, and they do the best with what they got. But there are things that the African American experience has intuited correctly, and so in that sense is much more orthodox than, again, like I had said earlier, than the slave masters who, quote unquote, were bringing Christianity, or that's the narrative, to the slaves. But there's this whole other side which um, needs to be navigated, and I know Orthodoxy is the kind of solution, or the solve to those problems, because so much of, and first of all, where I live and serve, there's a whole generation of African Americans, let's say, if we're just talking about evangelization, right, who aren't even Christian anymore. They don't know basic stories of the Bible. And so in one sense, that's obviously terrible, but in another sense, it's good, because I go, this is great. This is a fresh slate by which the scriptures and the life of Christ and the church can be given without the baggage. Because the other side of it is, there's so many people who, there's an aversion to things, of anything that even has a hint of being Catholic, right? Small c, saints, incense, hierarchy, all those things. And this is something that the African American community would benefit from, because all communities would benefit from it. But the historical kind of hegemony of certain evangelical traditions, Baptist, Pentecostal, these traditions that African Americans have traditionally found themselves aligned with, a lot of, from my perspective and my experience, the rejection of saints doesn't come from some sort of informed understanding. It comes from, because, well, you and your family have been Baptist, but that's it. You've never really questioned why. And I think for a lot of African Americans who have rejected Christianity, Orthodoxy becomes the thing by which they can begin to approach Christ, because some of these movements to want to find something much more ancient, how did the ancestors pray and worship? And so these movements, they're very organically and naturally found and answered in Orthodoxy, because it's so big, right? I mean, when you cease to look, you shouldn't, but so many people, I think, don't even realize how they still view Orthodoxy as another denomination, even though we have these lines, these party lines, and these kind of polemics that we throw out, like true church and all this and that, but yet we still operate like we're a denomination. And a lot of that comes from insecurity and fear, right? But being comfortable and understanding how profound, cosmic, and eternal the faith is, for me, it gives me this measure of freedom and security, and allows me to look at where people are at with a lot less anxiety, because I can look and see what's good and what Christ is already doing. Very much like say Herman of Alaska and what he did with the native peoples there. He looked and saw what Christ is already doing amongst those people and their culture, and that phronema isn't, we don't really have that. There's a few pockets of people that talk about it, but on the whole, we don't have that. And I mean, this is going to be this could be a whole thing, because then we talk about, well, why isn't that? And of course, there's the immigrant history, which is real. People coming from Greece and people coming, from Syria and from Lebanon, and I understand all that. And I actually think we need to be much more humble and appreciating those initial immigrant communities who have come and maintained the faith and worked, and that's good. There's no need to say like, oh, they just kind of hid Orthodoxy. No, no, no. They maintained it, and it's good. And I think that's a natural thing that needs to happen, is to acknowledge that, and now begin to look not so much outward in a negative sense of like ignoring things, but just moving forward in regards of, this is America. And if I could digress a little bit, when I look at an individual and they say that and I see that they need a greater measure of healing, right? Well, what do I need to do? I need to get them to see themselves honestly. If someone's not seeing themselves honestly, then confession is just this perfunctory thing that we go through. And there's value in it, but there could be and should be more. And so we need to have the courage, but more importantly, the faith in Christ and the trust to look at ourselves as Americans just honestly. And I think that's, for me, one of the biggest things of what the Brotherhood does, and one of the biggest things that evangelism on a larger scale needs to do, is to look at ourselves honestly. Because now we can say, yes, we see these mistakes. And me disavowing being a Baptist or Pentecostal as an African American, or if I was a European American, disavowing certain, racial and class tropes. You're free to do that now, because your identity isn't in that anymore. Your identity is in Christ and in His church that transcends this country that's only a few hundred years old. And that mindset, that isn't just fanciful, because for as treacherous as these times are, we have the benefit of a lot of history to look back on. And I don't mean this in any disrespect or any, again, this kind of like deconstruction for the sake of deconstruction. But Byzantium did fall. I've said this before, but Nubia was a Christian nation that most people don't even know of now. This temporal anchor and chain and weight, people really need to readjust themselves to it. And we need to really, because this country could disintegrate, in 10 years. So what happens to the faith now? You see? And that's why I'm so fascinated with, our early forefathers, because they lived as aliens in a strange land. It wasn't just something that they said, that's how they really lived. And I really believe that's what we need to do. And I think that the era of imperial Christendom is like all but done, and people don't realize that. And they're just wanting so badly to revive something that I don't know if Christ wants that to be revived. And so when we see ourselves as pilgrims and strangers, then you don't have anything to lose in that sense, and you're free. And that context of freedom allows you to give freely to others, because freely you've been given. And I think that's what we're missing. People become scared of the thought of an invasion of others coming into their parish and taking away and changing everything. I think it's an irrational fear. And that fear is the same thing that's happening on a larger scale, right? But if you see yourself as a pilgrim, truly, then you're free from that, and you're able to give freely. So.
Did years burn out those words? Did a voice whisper absurd? Did your mind comprehend and ask if you'd last till the end?